All right, so I guess I'll go through my history, and there's a bunch of topics that may be of small interest to the class that I will leave room for question and answers that maybe are interesting. So I started my film history. I did my undergraduate at Stanford. They have a small documentary film program there, and I did that, but I had lots of room to take other things because the major was pretty easy. I also started working at what they called the Instructional Television Network on campus, and there I started producing some documentaries without really knowing much what to do, but it's really kind of spurred my interest in documentary filmmaking. I did one interesting documentary there. I had a mentor, it was in psychology. His name was Dr. Phil Zimbardo. He was responsible for that infamous Stanford prison experiment, and he had a bunch of old tapes that the format didn't exist anymore. And anyway, I was able to put together an hour-long documentary on the prison study, which if you take Psych 1, you may unfortunately still have to watch now. It's called Quiet Rage. But anyway, that was my intro into documentary filmmaking, which is kind of mostly my passion these days. From undergrad, I went to film school and met Tom Cook over at USC. And we can talk more. I'm not sure if Tom talks a little bit about what the value of going and getting your master's, your MFA in film is. But you're free to ask me questions later. I have good things to say about film school and bad things to say about film school. I mean, there was most of the people in my class, I'm not sure if Tom agrees, but I didn't really like most of the people in my class. I did like Tom though. He's an exception to the rule. But I mean, the interesting people were extremely interesting, but the non-interesting people who are actually probably more famous than I am now, not the people I would hang out with, but pluses and minuses going to film school. But I did meet Tom there. And one of the things that, right as I was about to graduate, Tom talked me into teaming up with him and actually lighting one of these student projects that were hard to get. And Tom really wanted to partner and do the lighting and camera on this. Did Lee Unkrich talk to the class already?
Lee's going to be talking to us in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so Tom and I shot Lee's undergraduate film, and he talked me into doing it. I had no intention of lighting, but it was something I had never done before. I had done a lot of editing and some directing, and it was actually one of the most valuable things. Don't tell Tom this, but it was one of the most valuable things that I did in film school, only because I didn't really understand the jargon of lighting and camera, and it really took me out of my comfort zone. And lots of fun stories working with Tom Cook as a director of photography. But I did learn, that was one of those classes that I learned the most, mostly because, again, it took me out of my comfort zone and forced me to do something that I had a phobia about touching film. I didn't really want to load film. I guess you guys never really have to load film ever again, probably, but I never wanted to touch the actual film. It was but it was good to work with Tom and learn that. Anyway, during film school, there was this thing called the job book upstairs, which is just before they had digital ways of finding out about who needs work, who to team up with, who could pay you to do a job. And I started, doing some work while in film school for clients. I started working for companies like Bank of America and United Way, just doing corporate industrials. And Tom and I worked on a few. Actually, we did a few for the Department of Justice. Tom was my DP, and I wrote and direct them. And then Tom unfortunately moved to New Hampshire to start the film program. So he left me in Los Angeles, and I had to find other people to work with. But at that time, I then had a few clients out of film school, and together with another friend of mine from film school, we started a production company called Circa 2K. My friend spoke Japanese, which was a good entree into getting some Asian work. So there was a kind of a schism in the company. He kind of did a lot of Japanese related projects, and I did a lot of healthcare and educational related projects. But we did commercials for Toyota, and we did direct response hour-long videos for Guthy Renker that aired late night. If you want to, they were proactive and and when for your hair. And we did a bunch of those kinds of videos. What else? I'm just looking at my notes a little bit. We did a commercial with Leonardo DiCaprio. Anyway, that was on the Asian side. That was when celebrities really didn't do US commercials. They only did Japanese related commercials. We did some music videos and some vanity pieces for celebrities. But I started focusing more on doing healthcare related videos and educational related videos. So my clients were more people like City of Hope and UCLA and USC. Still continue to do some commercial work. I kind of like working with smaller crews than the 30-person crews. The big commercial shoots are kind of fun because you get to open up all the toys and move the camera in fun ways, but it's less creative really. It's more like there's so many people watching you and your decisions have already been made. And you just have to kind of get through the shot list on the day. The smaller crews and documentary styles, you kind of tend to work with smaller crews and it's a little bit more, I just find it more fun just because the day is not completely set and you don't know what's going to happen exactly. You just kind of follow your instincts a little bit. But I started making more documentary projects for Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and I worked on this 16-part documentary series for them, and that's where I won a few Emmys for. It was a program. It was a series called Imagine, and it was just documentary stories about, magic of medicine and children and pediatrics. And that was about 4.5 or 5 years doing those hour-long specials.
Wow.
They won a lot of awards, a lot of Telly Awards, which is like probably the main sort of industrial video award too. Now I'm a judge for the Tellys, but it's always good to get hardware for your clients, little statuettes Tellys aren't that hard to win really, but the clients really love them. Anyway, we continue to do more documentary work with the company. We did a documentary on James Cameron. When Titanic came out, we did a documentary on the Academy Awards and people who actually are fans of the Academy Awards. That was another documentary. So a lot of documentary work. And then it seemed natural to start pitching some reality television. And I've really run the gamut with pitching reality television. I can talk more about that too with question and answers, but pitched a lot of reality television and it's really hard now to pitch reality unless, well, there's some, at the very beginning stages, I could have had success, but I had a little bit of hubris. I pitched a series to We Entertainment, and here's the deal. So with reality television, you really want to concentrate on the intellectual property that you can own, because that's the only thing that can differentiate you from any other production company that might be pitching the same thing, or from someone else who would just steal the exact same idea. So my mistake when I pitched, so I was working for Children's Hospital doing that series, and they asked me to actually make a pilot to pitch because they really wanted to be on television. So we actually created a 30-minute pilot, which was just like a very long pitch reel for the show. And it wasn't really my best effort. I couldn't cast exactly who I wanted to because I had to go to the hospital. Anyway, it was a pretty good effort and we wanted to actually air it. But at first they wanted to pay me to do a new show, which is what I really wanted to do. But then they changed it to, well, we just want to acquire what you already did and just see how that goes. And I had a lot of hubris at the time. So I said, I really want to make a new pilot for it. And they said, well, we really just want to air the original and see how that goes. And then I waited on it. And my agent was not very responsive, and suddenly they just passed on the whole thing. So I made that mistake. And then I pitched a bunch of other things. What did we pitch? We pitched like a murder makeover show, which is basically a HGTV show, only that takes place in a house where a murder occurred. And you kind of discover it's kind of a whodunit plus a home makeover at the same time. And the host would have been like a psychic who kind of senses, who was the murderer, and it was a combination. Anyway, that show never got picked up. I pitched a crime show that was like a step-by-step what you should and shouldn't do if you were to be a victim in a crime. And it was kind of almost like a John Madden kind of, I don't know if you know what John Madden is, but it was kind of like a NFL kind of X's and O's about what to do in case you were a victim of a crime. Anyway, but none of these shows, I mean, people were interested, but it just never, the follow through never happened. It just never got really picked up when push came to shove to sign a check. But the key thing with a reality television show is the intellectual property. Having something in your pocket that nobody has that is exclusive to you. So the last thing that I pitched was a Jonestown. Jonestown was a cult in the 1970s, and we had hooked up with about 24 survivors of Jonestown, people in the cult, and they really wanted to go back to Jonestown for whatever reason. And anyway, so we had all these survivors of Jonestown kind of locked in, optioned to us only, and we thought this was the best intellectual property ever because we had all these great stories surrounding these survivors and new information about Jim Jones and his nefarious activities, and even another guy that helped him bring down the deaths of 900 people in Guyana. Anyway, it was a really exciting series. And we had this director, his name is Joe Berlinger. He does a lot of documentary reality television. We thought we had all the pieces. We even had Showtime ready to sign, but for some reason that thing fell apart. And I still don't know why that one fell apart. The budget was approved. I had learned my mistake from the LA nurses program. And so much that I'm like, Joe Berlinger was probably going to direct the whole thing. My role was going to be limited, but I thought at least I'd get started in reality television this way. And even that project fell apart. So I'm just throwing out the warning signs. If you want, maybe the better way to get into reality television is to go up through a recognized production company that's already doing a lot of reality television, become a field producer, and maybe work your way up to be able to pitch them ideas. Because coming in as a unique small production company, you either have to get tied up with a larger production company or have something that's completely irresistible that is tied only to you that no one else can have. Because all the other ideas that I've pitched that I didn't have intellectual property, I've seen them on the air already. There already is a murder makeover show. There already is this pediatric, the ongoings inside a pediatric hospital. All these ideas, even if they may have been fresh with me, I think they were, but you keep pitching them, and people at networks who are receiving the ideas and nodding their head and liking your concepts, they eventually go and start their own production companies, and suddenly they think that they've come up with this new idea, but really it was just a pitch they heard from me maybe 2 or 3 years ago. This goes on and on again. You can't really disprove the fact that they come up with the idea themselves unless it's something very specific. You've optioned a book, that you've optioned a character that you've optioned, something that's very specific that becomes your intellectual property. Anyway, that was my experience in reality television. I'll also talk a little bit about getting an agent and how that works. If people are interested, I can answer more questions about the importance of that versus the non-importance of that. Anyway, so what happened with me after pitching a lot of reality television is we started doing work in the immersive space. We started doing virtual reality work for marketing purposes. And at that time, which was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, VR was really just a novelty act. People would have us do it, but mostly it would be like at trade shows, people could put on goggles and experience some kind of aspect of their brand that was unique, or we did something for tourist boards. So we would, fly around Dubai with drones and get some cool shots and put that together for a tourist video or a VR project. So we started doing a lot of work in VR, some work in augmented reality. Then we sort of got hooked up with this British company called Emotion, which ended up merging with us. So technically I have 2 jobs. I am the creative director or head of content for Emotion Group, which is a VR company. And I also continue doing the other work that I've done under a new banner, which is now called Meridian Arc, which is essentially they got bored with all my other clients and gave them back to me. So I still do that on the side as a separate company. But most of my time now is spent doing virtual reality. And virtual reality is a tricky nut to crack as well, mostly because you can shoot a virtual reality. It's a great format, and there's a lot of pluses and minuses, and I can talk a little bit more about that as well. There's a lot of things you can't do, a lot of things you can do in virtual reality. It doesn't make sense in traditional documentary or narrative filmmaking that is both an impediment, but something very exciting as well. But the tricky thing about VR is distribution. Who's watching
Right.
VR? Who's actually using it? I mean, gamers use it, and that's great. But it's not, I'm not a gamer, and I don't really produce games. I have produced some CG VR, but really my passion is in live action VR. But a lot of studios are jumped into VR, but they have no channel. I mean, they have a channel, but no one's watching it. How do you monetize something that is kind of tricky, because you have to watch it in some kind of goggle format, and you have to, the best goggles are really expensive. So Emotion was trying to figure out how to get into VR and how to actually monetize it. And we found that the actual sweet spot is actually in location-based entertainment. So we actually produce virtual reality programs for like zoos and aquariums and science centers that are more location-based, kind of like in pods that are like behind me now, where we produce maybe a 7-minute program where you go into a motion pod and you actually travel somewhere. You literally move in. You get the sensation that you're moving in the pod, but you're also having a story and there's something to learn. So examples of what we do now is we produce like, I've gone to Tonga and shot humpback whales and humpback moms and calves. And you literally swim alongside humpback whales and you learn about whales. And you watch it in 3D and you physically feel like the whale is in front of you. We've done tiger sharks in the Bahamas, where you basically are surrounded by tiger sharks as you're feeding them and learning a little bit about the myths and the cool facts about tiger sharks. And 4 weeks ago, I just got back from Rwanda. We shot mountain gorillas in the volcanic mountains of Rwanda, where there's only 1,000 of them. And we're going to put that together. We're working on that right now, and that's going to be our first entree into zoos. So VR is kind of an exciting new thing to play with these days. It's a tricky medium because you can't light. You can't, everybody has to hide because you see everything. Editing is a bit of a challenge because you basically see the entire world, and then you have to figure out how to cut to something else where you see the entire world again. So it's a little bit of a challenge how to, in a sense, it's kind of like almost a little bit of a new frontier in terms of figuring out the jargon, figuring out what will cut, what won't cut, how quickly can you cut when you're in an immersive 3D space. So, montage is kind of out of the question because it's just too much information too fast and you can't really absorb anything. So in a sense, it's kind of like I got to relearn and kind of think about what makes for good narrative storytelling in virtual reality. So that's kind of exciting and kind of challenge. I mean, I like, as you can hear, I kind of like to light things. I like to use different lenses, and you can't really do those kinds of things in virtual reality. Things have to, the camera's fixed. There's like 8 cameras surrounding, 8 cameras shooting at the same time. It's fixed lenses. They're all wide angle lenses. So you have to figure out new ways of kind of conveying storytelling. You have to bring subjects closer to you. And sometimes if they're like gorillas and whales, they don't really cooperate very well. So you have to kind of, it's almost like you're writing as you're shooting, trying to figure out what it is you have, what it is you thought you have, and how can you build a sequence around what you actually got versus what you thought you would get. Anyway.
Ken, gonna jump in real quick. Where do you see, and maybe this is what you're discovering, the future of VR? Is it going to be in education, entertainment? What do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of great uses of VR. I think education or edutainment is kind of what we do right now, which I think is an easy thing to think about. I think there will be more. I mean, I'm hoping it doesn't go the way of like 3D television went,
right?
Which is really just a novelty. But I think in these sort of theater spaces that we build in aquariums and zoos and science centers, I think that makes a lot of sense because I think it's both it's kind of a high-end extra little piece of excitement at the end of your day at the aquarium or at the zoo. You're already kind of primed for some kind of educational experience, and I think giving something that's kind of new and exciting and different and kind of on your bucket list, like seeing whales or sharks or gorillas, makes sense. And I think there could easily be new forms of storytelling, narrative storytelling. I mean, our documentaries are sort of slightly narrative in style, but documentary in flavor. But I think, I mean, I will say I was, you know, when you actually make VR programming, you usually don't get to see the finished product till the very end stage. We're working with really crappy, what they call rough stitches, because, you know, you have to kind of see it, but it's really roughly done. So, and it's in mono, and it's because the processing power is so great to see these high resolution images, you're often looking at very rough, ugly looking imagery. And it's really depressing. And it's like, is that even a good shot? Sometimes I can't even see, like, how many gorillas are there, because I can't even count them. The resolution is so poor in your offline stages. But then when you finally get to see it in its full glory in 3D, and it really is quite a shock. I mean, it's really quite like, oh my God, this is really cool looking. And I usually don't surprise myself too often, but when you finally get to see it in 3D and high res, it's really astounding, and it's really immersive, and it feels different from, I mean, it's kind of like, it feels a little bit like when you go to your first IMAX movie and you see it in the big screen, you really feel overwhelmed by the size. VR can do that. It really has that power. But there's other applications for it as well. You know, people might want to go into therapeutic VR. I've seen videos of, like, you know, war veterans who are amputees. They used to surf, and suddenly in VR they can put on goggles, and you really feel like you're surfing. And you know, they're brought to tears because it brings back a feeling that you just can't. It's just overpowering for them. And VR is also used in pain management for patients who can't take traditional pain medication because it disagrees with their system or they're allergic to it. But the immersion is so powerful that you can put someone in there, and they can, you know, basically rid themselves of, you know, migraine therapy or whatever other pain therapy that they might have. Anyway, so I really think it's a powerful medium. I think we've hit the little tip of the iceberg as to how it can be used, and I think other potential filmmakers might figure out other uses of how to get it to people, where to get it to people, because it's, you know, we're also developing a home product. But, you know, I'll be honest with you, I don't have as much faith in the home product. I mean, I think, to me, VR, you have to see it in really high resolution, and the home product is based on, like, you know, slipping like a phone into a pair of goggles. You watch really low resolution VR. It's 360. You can, you know, it's there, but it's not really exciting to me personally. I don't want to. If you want to buy our product, go ahead and buy the product. But converting what we've done in high res and kind of converting for our home use, I don't know. There's a lot of channels out there. You can download VR just from Google. You can download it from Discovery. You can download so many places, but, you know, you have to have like a goggle that's worthy of watching it. Because I don't know, to me, it's not particularly extra special unless it's really in that really controlled setting in high resolution. I love it in 3D, and it's just really, you know, to see like these gorillas in 3D where they're just like a few feet away. I mean, they literally come up to the camera because they're attracted to the camera. And they're literally just, they're sniffing the camera, and you watch it in the goggles, and it's like this gigantic gorilla in your face. You just can't really get that anymore. You know, I'm not, you know, our partners are zoos, but I'm hoping that some of these attractions will go away. I mean, I don't think like orcas should be in zoos and elephants should be in zoos. If we create experiences in VR that is so, you know, that the story is so strong and the animals are so, you know, they're doing things that are so remarkable, as opposed to just seeing, you know, the back of a gorilla way in the corner over there at the zoo. It's not particularly exciting. Anyway, so I think there is a lot of potential for VR. And
you say you're shooting high res. You're talking 4K, 8K, what?
Well, it's literally 8K per eye.
Wow, really?
So it's enormous. I mean, I can't even find a headset to play it back at that resolution, really. We're kind of future-proofing it. Someday maybe we could, but when I watch it, and I'm astounded, it's really, really about 4K per eye. But we shoot, it's literally, you know, it's 8 cameras the new Insta-Titan camera is 8 cameras, and it uses an algorithm to figure out the depth of perception. And it's, that's a whole other consideration
Sweet.
doing live action VR, What do you
Neat.
think?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So, so there's a lot of, this is what I'm talking about. It's like a lot of things to figure out. Like you can't have things too close to camera or you lose the 3D. If you have them too far away, it's not as impressive. We are always trying to figure out, because we're selling motion pods to our partners, trying to figure out how we can get movement in something that's not innately movement. It's very tricky to move the camera like in a volcano forest, but we do things to kind of like drones and handheld to kind of manufacture movement, because it's really kind of exciting when you can move the camera. That makes it just a little bit more extra special. So anyway, should I open up to questions? I mean, I think you could ask questions about film school, graduate film school, the value of it, maybe how to start your own production company, or interesting stories about Tom Cook and film school, or anything about VR.
I think many of them will be interested in your background starting up your own production company. Just to give you some background, we just today finished their presentations. They each found a graduate school and reported on that to the rest of the class. So it's topical. Somebody actually did Stanford, strangely enough, so they can talk to you about that.
Well, Cardinal.
What I thought we might do, if you've got the time, is go around and let everybody introduce themselves, who they are, and kind of what their interest is in production before we get any further, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, I'll go around relative to my listing. Brad, you want to make sure you're not on mute and say hi to Ken? Brad, you want to unmute yourself and say hi to Ken and tell him who you are and what your area of study is or interest?
Hi, I'm Brad Rideout. I am a double major in film production and film studies, senior at Keene State, and I basically want to direct and or screenwrite.
Excellent.
There we go. Michael?
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm a senior here at Keene. I like cinematography a lot, and also interested in lighting, like DP stuff, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what we call cinematography here. So, Emily.
Hi, my name's Emily. I'm a sophomore and I'm interested in cinematography and directing.
Show.
Hi, my name is Sho. I'm a senior and I like making music and sound design.
Who
Great.
else is listed? Who's listed as me? Who is that next? Oh. In blue. Oh.
I guess I'm labeled as Tom Cook, but I'm
Yes.
Joseph Cucurulo,
Joseph.
and I'm a sophomore, and I'm interested in cinematography and directing.
Great.
Good. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Howard. I'm also a film production major here at Keene, and I'm mostly interested in writing for TV or film.
Jack?
Hi, my name is Jack Amanon. I'm a senior here at Keene State. I'm a film production major, and I'm most interested in cinematography and directing.
Good. Christy?
Hi, I'm Christy Riley. I am a senior here at Keene State, and I'm into film directing and writing as well.
Serena?
Hi, I'm Serena. I'm minoring in sustainability and majoring in film production, and I'm interested in editing.
Blake?
Hi, I'm Blake. I'm a junior, and I'm interested in mostly editing, but some cinematography.
A lot of cinematographers, Tom Cook.
Yes, there are. I'm kind of surprised at that. I didn't realize it. So a couple of last folks whose cameras aren't working or something like that. Joe, want to say hi to Ken? Okay, Ben, why don't you jump in while Joe gets his act together?
Hi, I'm Ben, and my interest is in not sending, setting live events, live streaming, broadcasting, and sound design, and eventually doing my own independent films.
Very good. Well, the sound work and the events guy, you guys easy. I think those are easier paths because I think, if you want to do sound, there's so much work doing sound. It's so easy, it's easy to jump in and do sound. You just, depending on where you want to live, if you want to live in, either LA or Los Angeles or New York, or Boston, or any of those places where there's a lot of production work going on. I'm not sure if there's a lot going on in New England, but sound, you could, so many people who want to do sound can easily get work. Cinematography, Tom will tell you, is a little trickier because it's always that balance between wanting to keep yourself labeled as a cinematographer, but also being able to pay rent, because sometimes you just can't jump into the cinematography paying gigs right away. But you kind of have to do that balance between volunteering to do either friends projects, shoot their projects, build your reel, build a lot of connections, let people know that you're a DP, but also maybe pick up grip work, pick up gaffing work where you can to pay bills. So it's tricky as a cinematographer sometimes, but you just basically have to keep shooting and shooting and shooting anything you possibly can, and then make contacts obviously, and finding directors that you can shoot for who rehired.
It's not a bad segue into Ken. How did you and Rod start Circa 2K, and how long did it take you before you really became sustainable?
So I mentioned that I had like a few clients like during film school, and I kind of like just kept up with them, and hopefully good work begets more work. And so I had like a handful of clients, and he had a handful of my business partner had a handful of the Japanese connections and clients. So we just started small, and then at one point we actually got too big, to be honest. So you have to be careful about that, because suddenly your overhead is gigantic. And when we hit a recession, and we had like directors on staff that you have to pay monthly retainers to, you can see a lot of your work go away. Where there's a commercial strike, an actor strike. So, but we bootstrapped it pretty much without having to put too much money or put any money into it, because we had like a handful of clients who just kept the overhead low. That's the key. I mean, right now, as I'm kind of rebuilding that production company on the side, I'm just keeping the overhead as low as possible, and just, I'm at a point now though, it's a little easier because I have like a couple decades worth of clients that keep calling that I don't have to really market. But in the early stages it was a little tricky, and a lot of cold calling. But nowadays it's also, there's other digital formats to figure out who's got work. I mean, even you're going to find things on Craigslist for people who need something made, and that work begets other work. And there's other, you look up the paid production crews, and sometimes like somebody needs not just a production person, but they need a project made, and you can kind of like start trying to pitch and say, well, I'm a one-stop shop with my crew, and kind of build projects that way. So it's, I think with the advent of social media and all their digital, message boards and places where you can find out about projects, to a certain extent it's a little easier. To a certain extent it's a little harder, because everybody with, essentially almost with an iPhone 13 can now call themselves a producer director and make projects. And I think one thing you'll learn in film school is just because you have a nice piece of lens or a nice way of recording does not necessarily make you a storyteller. And you have to kind of, I'm still doing budgets where I'm budgeting up against some guy with a nice camcorder or something, with a nice camera that I bought for, you can buy a really nice camera now for under $10,000 and call yourself a production company. So it's a little tricky, because, with a nice piece of glass and 4K resolution, suddenly your stuff looks amazing. You shoot in slow-mo and suddenly, hey, look at me, I'm making great images, but you know, that's not necessarily going to cut it, right? So you're going to be in competition with, you know, your uncle's, you know, kid who just had a bar mitzvah, accuses money to buy a camera and calling himself a producer. So it's a little tricky to differentiate your stuff and your style. So it's good to kind of figure out what kind of stories you want to tell, how you want to tell them, what differentiates you, and be able to show that to clients what it is that you do a little differently than anybody else.
I've got our students, I ask them to, anytime we have guests such as yourself here, I ask them to do a little research, get some background, and have some questions for you. So I've got a list of those, but before I go there, obviously I got to ask, how did COVID hit you and the company?
Not well, obviously. I mean, so with the virtual reality, all of our location-based entertainment just stopped, you know, because zoos closed, aquariums closed, you know, all of our partners basically shut down. And it was at a really bad time because the company's really only 4 years old. And we're just at the start of becoming profitable, which was so frustrating. We were so close. But that's when we switched gears and started creating these home products. So we took all of the underwater projects that I had created, and we created this thing called Let's Explore the Oceans, which is a little VR home product, which again, you know, I'm not like excited about VR at home unless it's really done well, but it sold pretty well. So that helped us a little bit on the VR side. On the Meridian Arc production company side, you know, a lot of our clients, again, were healthcare clients, and you know, you couldn't go into hospitals, you couldn't go into healthcare centers, you couldn't, you know, it was very hard to shoot. We did a little tiny bit of shooting in very controlled settings, very COVID compliant, but you know, not everybody was excited. Not all of our clients were excited about figuring out how to do it. You know, you have to shoot in a gigantic auditorium with windows open, with airflow, small crew, small footprint. You know, the producer's guide came up with protocols for shooting in COVID. We followed them, but you know, it was still like, could you get subjects to be in front of a camera with, you don't know this crew person, you don't know where they've been. You know, we would constantly get tested, but you know, you got tested 72 hours ago, that doesn't mean you don't have COVID, you know, so.
Right.
So it was tricky.
Right.
Not everything was, but you know, it's coming back. Everyone is busy in Los Angeles right now. It's hard to actually, we work with a lot of freelancers, and it's tricky to get freelancers now. So things have come roaring back. So that's the plus side. But I didn't shoot any VR for about 20 months, which
wow.
You know, and once you start, you know, you get the itch. You want to be in the field. You want to shoot. You want to tell stories. It's kind of hard to hunker down and do nothing except reformat your stuff into a different product. Not the most exciting part of my job, but you know, that's what we were working on.
Fair enough. I think I'll turn it over to the class. And Jack, you were the first with a question for Ken. Yeah, I got them down here. I asked you to pick them up. Why don't we, Lauren, why don't you jump in and ask one while Jack's getting his cheat sheet.
Okay. Hi, Ken. Mine's long-winded, so bear with me. In terms of being a producer on films, Tom, would you mind muting real quick? Just hearing myself. Yeah, so in terms of being a producer, how do you co-manage production roles with other people who are labeled producers, co-producers? My initial assumptions led me to believe producers were primarily like financial people involved in film. But during studying, I've come to understand producers are often managing schedules alongside budgets. Sometimes they're casting and other various roles that are not filmed. So what roles are you usually playing as producer, and what are the other producers who are on set doing?
That's a good question. And producer is a very ambiguous term these days, and it means different things depending on which kinds of projects you're working on. So in my history, I've done pretty much every different kind of producer. The one I least like is the line producer on a commercial shoot, or kind of the equivalent of a UPM on a film shoot. These are the guys, the guys both women and female, but these are the people that really do all the day-to-day producing, the real in the trenches producing, and those are the people that are basically driving to the set, putting out fires as they go, and that's what a UPM does. They basically they're in a burning house and they're figuring out all the ways to kind of put out the fires. Mostly now I spend time as an executive producer, which is basically just kind of putting the bigger pieces together, hiring the right people. Yeah, and then the regular producer can mean exactly what you're talking about. Sometimes it's just financial. Sometimes it's just the person who's leading the charge and hiring all the other categories. Which one, I don't know. It depends on which. If you're on a film shoot, everyone's a producer, right? All the actors are producers. All the anyone involved in the formation of the product is asking for producer credit just to get a piece of the pie on the back end. But it's your line producer or UPM that's really doing all the work, and together with the AD. Did I even partially answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it was kind of a vague question anyway. So it's interesting just to hear about, different
skill sets, right? One is like, the producer and the executive producers almost like get the deal made, get the pieces put together. If you're the kind of person who loves figuring out puzzles, figuring out problem solving, you like the pressure of having the rug pulled out from under you and figuring out what the answers are. That's the UPM, that's the line producer role. And a lot of, I know a lot of people, I'm not great at it. I don't thrive on it, but some people just thrive on it. They live for it. They want to figure it. They almost want the problems to surface so that they can fix them, but it's a very specific skill set, and it really requires knowing a lot of people, working deals. To get to those positions, you kind of, at least in the commercial world, is you go from kind of like the key PA, which is kind of the entry level on that role, to like a coordinating producer or managing producer who works for the line producer. So that's kind of if you want to go up the ladder to get to those kinds of positions, those are the 4 steps, and then if you're in the control of the project, you're on the upper end. Above the line, that will be a producer and executive producer.
Great, thanks, Jack. You ready to go? Got a question for Ken?
Yeah, so my question was, working in the commercial space, how difficult is it to keep up with changing trends? And I feel like this question is even more pertinent considering, I don't know, your work with VR.
It's not that tricky. I mean, if you're around filmmakers and DPs, you hear about what people are doing and how they're doing it. It's just a matter of being in the community, and you start realizing, nobody's doing Steadicam anymore. It's becoming obsolete, because everybody is doing Movi, or there's so many different easier ways to stabilize a camera shot, so you just figure out who's doing what and how certain shots are getting done, and you kind of like talk about it, and people say, it's easy to research, or you call up somebody, how do they do that? And you just figure it, and then you go and you see it. So it's not really hard once you're sort of in that community. All the new techniques and all the things that people are doing just kind of become obvious. It's a little, I'll admit though, it's a little daunting keeping up in the digital space in terms of, I don't really keep up on, what I can now do in Final Cut 10 that I couldn't do in Final Cut 7, or what the new plugins allow me to do in terms of, doing an optical flow on it. Before, just as an example, you'd always think about doing an interview and B-roll covers up the cut. but now you can literally do an optical flow, and depending on how much people move during the interview, you can manipulate their interview so amazingly that you don't even need the B-roll to cover it up. Or the idea that if I have a voiceover guy read a certain set of two paragraphs, I can basically manipulate his audio now in post to have him say anything I want him to say, which is great in reality television, because something you need you need someone to say a quick little segue to get you from one scene to another scene, but you don't want to bring in the actor. But if you have tools now to make them say what you want them to say without having to bring them in. I'm not sure if that's quasi illegal or not, but literally there's so many new tools and new ways of doing things that in certain instances, I feel like I'm a little bit behind, but in certain instances, you kind of hear about them, you kind of realize, my God, I can't believe I can do that now. And it really does affect storytelling. Anyway, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think once you're in a community, you pretty much start figuring out what people are doing, and you ask, and you get astounded by what can be done digitally these days.
Here's a stupid edge to that question. You were talking about being able to take something that an actor, I assume, or whoever is your performer, and manipulate what they've said and make them say anything you want. I know that major actors, you can't even put in a hand double or something. It's got to be them. Have you encountered that yet, or do you expect to?
I've never tried to do it that way. Mostly it's with voiceover artists that I don't want to bring back in session fee, that we can manipulate what it is they say. Oftentimes, or it's a interview subject, like for instance, this primatologist that I worked with, who's doing the voiceover for this gorilla thing. I back myself up, have her read something that I can then manipulate in just in case. I mean, granted, there's drawbacks. I can't really control the performance necessarily, but if I'm stuck and I need their voice to say something, I can use the tools now to have them help me with a little transition piece or something.
That's amazing. Emily, you got a question for Ken?
What piece of advice you wish someone gave you when you started producing?
Say that again.
Okay. Wait, can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay. What is one piece of advice you wish someone gave you when you started producing?
It's a good question. There's a lot of little things along the way. I mean, for me, it's if you can work with your friends, work with your friends. It makes it much more enjoyable. Don't necessarily be thinking that the big productions are the most fun productions for the reasons I've said earlier. Sometimes it's the personal projects or the projects you work with a small crew that are more valuable, that you really get to experiment with. I mean, granted, if you have a cool effect or something cool in a commercial, it's kind of fun to, try something you've never done before, or use a piece of equipment you've never had a budget for. That's kind of exciting, but literally there's so little creativity in commercial production these days. You're just kind of starting at the top of the day and going to the bottom of the day, and everything is so choreographed and pre-bizzed out that there's no I don't know, for me, I enjoy being in the field with people that I enjoy, that are co-storytellers. So those are the best days, when I'm collaborating with like-minded people in an environment where you can experiment a little bit. So does that answer your question? Or you were talking more about how to get into producing?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
You talked earlier about doing like underwater stuff. Did you shoot that yourself, or did you get somebody to shoot it for you? Because again, I'm a diver, so I would love to do that for you.
You couldn't pay me enough to actually swim next to a tiger shark. I was on the boat watching on my little clamshell what they were doing 40 meters down. No, with the whales, I could get in the water, but again, so with the whales, I needed a free diver, because you can't swim alongside a humpback whale in Tonga with scuba equipment.
Right.
And I can hold my breath with my asthma for about 40 seconds tops. These free divers can actually hold their breath for 4 minutes while pushing a somewhat buoyant but 13 camera system next to a humpback whale. So I wasn't doing that. And again, we're all hiding on the boat for the most part, because you have to then explain why there's other people in the water. So it's a little tricky how you do VR. But no, I wasn't, although I was in the water sometimes with the humpbacks, I was not filming. There are specialty cinematographers for almost everything, and for sure there are specialty cinematographers who film underwater and have done this for years. And although I would love to be able to do it, it's not my forte. So yeah,
Sure.
and that's a good point though. With VR, especially underwater VR, it's really a cinematographer's medium. I mean, granted, I get to write it at the end and edit it and conceive the project and put the pieces together. But when it comes down to it, I'm on the boat and a cinematographer is underwater with the goods. So certain things lend themselves to cinematography. VR can be one of those. Although VR live action, like with the gorillas, that's more of it's not really a cinematographer's, because you just kind of leave the camera and you kind of see what happens, and you have to think on the field, what just happened? I can use in my story, because what I thought was going to happen didn't happen, and what I thought was in the document didn't happen. So you're scratching your head while you're filming, thinking, what did I just record? And I want to be able to create a scene out of. So certain things lend themselves to, who's the star. In that case, no one's the star. It's really just the producer who can figure out how to get a camera and get a VR camera lugged up the mountain in Rwanda, versus in underwater, it's a cinematographer's medium. And then if it's a CG, obviously it's a CG artist medium, not so much a director's medium. It's really the creativity of the art team if it's a CG project.
Right. I was going to ask that, but you answered it already. Ben, you've got some questions for Ken.
Yeah, so actually, if you don't mind, I actually might veer off what I was originally going to ask a little bit. You see, talking about virtual reality, I remember reading.
Did we lose me? Oh,
Sorry,
no,
what was
I'm
that?
Frozen.
Oh, but with virtual reality, I can't remember what movie it was, but I remember reading a Wikipedia article about a movie in which and this was before virtual reality, but there was there were like multiple endings that were filmed, and then the audience or something got to vote on like which ending they wanted to see. And I just thought it'd be interesting as seeing like virtual reality or that kind of storytelling with like interactive stuff with the audience. Like if we started to see that merged into traditional cinemas, do you see that happening at all, or do you predict that might happen at all?
You still with us, Ken?
I don't see him here. Oh, there.
Am I back?
You're back, I think.
Sorry about that.
You are. Good. Did you hear any of Ben's question?
No, I didn't. Ben, could you repeat it? Sorry.
Okay. All you.
Oh, that's fine. So I remember once reading a Wikipedia article. I can't remember which film it was, but it was this was of course in the 80s or something, before virtual reality, but there was some sort of experimental technique where like an audience was asked to vote on which ending they wanted to see, and there were like multiple endings of a movie that were filmed. And talking about virtual reality, I'm wondering if we might see a resurgence of some sort of experimental technique like that involving audience participation within more traditional cinema viewing. Would you predict that might be happening soon?
Yeah, I think it could be, especially since the technology is always being able to process images faster. I mean, there was that, wasn't there that Netflix Black Mirror episode maybe a year or two ago, which kind of dabbled in that, where it was a little nonlinear. I mean, it was not completely effective, but it was kind of intriguing at the same time. I I think Yeah, and I think when maybe you're talking about the 80s, I think that was like was it the movie Clue that had like 3 separate endings and you could like pick which ending you wanted to watch in the theaters or something like that. But I think technology is improving, and I think invoking some kind of interactive component to certain narrative flows will be very intriguing. It's ridiculously complicated, but I think that's a very exciting area to potentially go into, especially as essentially your phone has the processing power to almost pick and choose and make programs feel linear. Yeah, I mean, virtual reality could benefit from that too. Just almost any other medium could do it with. I don't think necessarily virtual reality is going to have be the leader on interactive programming, but it certainly could be.
Great. Cole, I think you may have our last at least scheduled question for Ken. Where'd you go? Did Cole? I think Cole was not feeling well, so he took off, and he was going to chime in on us. Anybody got any extemporaneous questions for Mr. Musin? What do you got coming up that is exciting you the most?
Finishing up the Gorilla project is number one, and then
right.
Might be shooting manta rays in Mozambique. That would be kind of exciting.
Sweet.
Or belugas in Iceland.
In Iceland.
Yeah, evidently one of our partners actually paid for 2 belugas who were needed to be rescued, to be brought to Iceland, and they're in a reserve there. The thing about VR, especially live action VR with wildlife, is 3 things you really need. You need predictability of the animal. You need, especially if it's underwater, you need clarity of image. And then you have to be able to film it within a reasonable amount of time, or it becomes cost prohibitive. So those are not every subject matter lends itself to a good VR project, and especially with us. I guess the 4th thing is we want to be able to move the camera somehow, if we can. I mean, with the gorillas, we're really hampered because you really can't move the camera very well up in those hills. So we had to figure out other ways to give our motion platform a reason to move, to kind of shake the platform. But so we discovered when a 400-pound silverback gorilla jumps because he's pissed off, the ground literally shakes, and so we'll be shaking that pod when those gorillas move, because we really do feel their enormity. They're just so gigantic. But and then we chuck in drone shots and truck in some stabilized trekking shots to kind of give it movement. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to those projects, and then on the Meridian Arc side, just staying employed, keep doing more and more of the same stuff. I don't think there's anything exciting in terms of novel about that work. It's just new clients and helping them out. So nothing particularly exciting there, just more of the same.
So 2 questions from me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like your focus, no pun intended, or emphasis really is on the VR. Is that what you and your company are doing most? And then my second part is, where do you obtain your clients? It sounded like earlier they come to you. You've just got the reputation. Is that the case?
Yeah. So I do 2 things. I spend most of my time doing VR, but not all my time. I do the other projects on the side. Luckily for me with the VR stuff, since I'm just a creative guy, I don't have to worry about the selling. So that's a relief, because for the first say 25 years of my career, I'm just always feeling like a door-to-door salesman, making calls and trying to talk clients and doing budgets. Luckily with the VR stuff, someone in the company is working on selling concepts to zoos and aquariums and science centers. So I'm not really worried about that. I just worry about coming up with new content ideas for our current partners and giving them new ideas to pitch to new clients. So that's good. And then on the other side, yeah, I'm always thinking about who my client list is in terms of medical and healthcare and educational clients. So that's a constant, who wants projects, same as before, calling up old clients, trying to get in with new clients who are doing similar work and saying, I can do it better. That's the life of a production company. You're always selling.
So obviously you're invested pretty heavily, at least professionally, in the VR, and you'd made reference to kind of the passing fad of 3D. Do you think VR is here to stay? Yeah, I know you hope it is.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people have created great content and they've been able to do nothing with it. Studios have invested. Studios have heard, oh, we got to do something in VR. But we got to get something. Let's do something. And they, maybe they'll spend $500,000 creating, a VR for Terminator Salvation or whatever, but no one sees it because there's no venue for it, or it just kind of sits on the studio website, or or maybe there's an attraction at Universal for something, but there's very little distribution. So luckily, we've, at least with this wildlife conservation themed VR, we found an audience. So people at location-based aquariums and zoos will, either it's included in the cost of the ticket because the zoo mandates it, or they'll pay the extra fee to go view it because they just happen to be there. So we've cracked a small nut of the VR pie in terms of when will people actually pay money to view this. So that's one, we've figured out one thing, but there might be others, right? I've seen other underwater VR that's spectacular. We didn't shoot it, we don't own it, but they can't do anything with it because they don't know what they've only thought about production. They've never thought about distribution. So I think maybe since we're doing this, maybe more venues will say, oh, I heard about that VR theater at Mandalay Bay's Shark Reef Aquarium. We should think about doing a VR theater for this kind of concept. Maybe that will work. So hopefully the VR theater concept at locations will pick up, and maybe other people will start producing content as well. Or there might be, maybe people will spend more money at home and get, I'm not sure about the home market, but maybe there's some amazing high-end VR goggles you can get that I think are, the programming could be fantastic, but you got to get people to either pay for it, or the cost of those VR headsets have to come down. So someone else besides a gamer will buy it, Perhaps maybe health and relaxation might be an area for VR, right? Where it's the visuals are so soothing, and maybe there's biofeedback associated with it, where you kind of can get yourself into such a great meditative state that you can't live without your VR headset. I don't know what the possibilities might be, but maybe making it more social, right? Because when you're in a goggle headset, just like you're in a goggle headset with VR, it's antisocial to a certain extent. But maybe as avatars become, and you're able to actually transport yourself within somebody else's image, or in a sense be in someone else's environment, maybe it becomes more social. It'll kick in more as a mass entertainment kind of concept. It's a little bit of the new frontier, so I think it's kind of exciting that way. But it's there's a lot of pitfalls. I've seen a lot of people spend a lot of money creating content that goes nowhere.
Yep. Well, you've been with us for about an hour. Everybody, any questions before we let Ken go? Doesn't look like it. Thank you so much, my friend, for time with us. Hi to Rod and Ebba and the kids.
Same to Kelly and whoever. What's the new Mr. Scott's name?
Watson.
Watson and Benjamin, of course.
And I was going to say, Walter looks like an idiot wearing his VR goggles.
Walter looks exactly like you. He's quite the. Does he not look exactly like you?
That's not nice. That's not nice. I'll
compliment. You're a handsome man, Tom Cook.
There we go. Well, thanks. We need to stay in touch more often, and thank you so much for your time, Ken.
I didn't get to talk anything about like the ice to liquid ratio that Tom Quick has developed, or any of those.
You got all that.
How to create a Ghostbuster, or any of those, or tarantula stories in the.
Oh God, yeah. on shooting Lee's project, right? The Ghostbusters don't exist anymore.
Oh no.
No, you can't find strawberry schnapps.
What a
So
sad day for you, my friend.
life is tough, and Jolt is gone too now.
Oh, that's true.
So what am I gonna do? So anyhow, always good to see you. We got to get together sometime soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, good seeing you, Tom. Good seeing you, everybody.
Hey, take care, buddy. Okay, bye.